Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you all to this seminar, which is about the Oversight Board in Pakistan. As you are all aware about this development happening over a period of time, and with the history of this, that it was an issue and a matter going on between the SECP and the Institute, which is now pretty much finalized in one side. So that today's whole session primarily revolves around that what it was, how it has been settled, and what are the matters related therewith. In the start of that, there is a presentation by Shah Sahab. So we'll start with that presentation, and from then onwards there will be a question answer session, and then we'll take it forward from there. If I please welcome Shah Sahab for his presentation.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Zulfikar, and thank you to all the participants, ladies and gentlemen. As Zulfikar just mentioned, Oversight Board has been an issue, a major issue that the Institute has had to face for more than a decade now. I think as you will recall, actually the concept of oversight started with Sarbanes-Oxley Act. When the Enron and WorldCom happened, at that time, I think in 2001, in US, they established this Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and it was at that time that the governments and the regulators decided that the self-governance, by the accountants governing themselves, making their own rules and doing their own oversight is simply not acceptable. So that is the time that the Oversight Board started to be established around the world, and we started facing this problem in around 2001, 2002. Also, you will recall that initially one major thing that happened was mandatory rotation on all listed companies, which Institute resisted at that time, and then subsequently with SECP, this was a compromise that, okay, we'll have mandatory rotation on financial sector, banks and other financial sector companies, whereas for all other listed companies it will be the rotation of partner. So, and that was the time of Mr. Khalid Mirza, who used to be in the council. Shabbar and Zafar are sitting here. We had that, I think, a lot of debates at that time about these things. First time the pressure that was exercised on Institute was actually in 2005 when Zafar was the president, and I was the vice president of the Institute, and we had this ROSC. ROSC is the report on standards and codes that is carried out by the World Bank and IMF on different countries, and they carried out the ROSC of Pakistan on accounting and auditing standards. What is the state of accounting and auditing standards? And a major issue that they raised was that the audit oversight in Pakistan was not independent from the profession. And at that time, you'll recall that we used to have a quality control committee, which used to, a kind of a peer review used to be there. I think quality control committee was there, and we had this mandatory due to Code of Corporate Governance requirement that all listed companies must go through the quality control rating through the quality control committee. So as a result of ROSC, actually, I think if you look at the ROSC report of 2005, one of the major recommendation and also a kind of deviation compared to all other ROSC reports was that we were able to convince the World Bank that our framework of quality control with some modifications should be appropriate. So we kind of made a compromise that we will make our quality control system more robust. We will convert the quality control committee into a quality assurance control board and it will make it totally independent from the institute and the council, except that the framework will be approved by the council. But other than that, and funding will be provided by the council and the institute. Other than that, the members of the board, once appointed, will have a fixed tenure of 3 years, and they will be working independent of the council. So that framework, was accepted by the World Bank. More or less, they were happy with that. The only thing they said that, okay, in Pakistan's case, because the profession is doing something on quality control, which they actually said that it is fine, the only thing they recommended was that at least there should be an independent oversight arrangement within SECP. So instead of Quality Assurance Board, they recommended that there should be an oversight arrangement within the SECP, independent of the profession, and which should carry out the oversight of the ICAP. However, unfortunately, or whatever the reason, SECP never did establish such oversight. So I understand now there is the second ROSC is being currently carried out, I suppose. It is still in process. But in the meantime, obviously, this debate has been going on, and now the situation is that almost all the major jurisdictions, an independent oversight board has been established, and all the international donors, World Bank, European Union, and IASCO, etc., whenever they review the accounting and auditing setups in Pakistan, they come up with this concern that, your oversight, you don't have an independent oversight over the profession, and this quality assurance board's system that you have is not sufficiently independent and effective enough to be recognized at a global level. So that is the broad background I wanted to give you before I start the formal presentation that Shahid has prepared, and I'll try to convey his messages to you. So, need for independent oversight board, this is broadly the presentation. As far as the need is concerned, I think I summarized it broadly to you, but obviously this was the intent right from the very beginning when these audit failures occurred at global level. So to restore public confidence in the reliability of the financial reporting after a number of high-profile corporate scandals in Europe and US. Obviously, there have been, by the way, number of high-profile issues in Pakistan also, but maybe not to that extent, but there have been number of them. To enhance and improve the audit quality by putting in place a mechanism for an independent oversight of the audit profession. As I said, almost all major countries of the world have established the system of audit oversight independent of the professional bodies. So, current quality control system through QAB under ICAP does not appear to be independent to regulators and multilateral agencies, as I mentioned. So, in this background, there has been a debate that was going on between the institute and SECP, and I think a few years ago the institute had set up a committee, but because of some disagreement on the legislative aspect as to whether it requires amendment in the ICAP ordinance, ICAP law, or SECP Act, or company law, what should be the mechanism. So on those things, I think the previous committee did some work, but because of disagreement on that, they got varying opinions from the lawyers. So the work didn't come to a fruition and to a conclusion. But recently, I think in one of the meetings about, I don't know when this meeting took place, in which Chairman SECP also participated, and I think there has been a lot of pressure on SECP from IASCO and the European Union and World Bank, and I think same also on the institute. So I think finally Council recognized that we are living in this world. So if we want our auditing and accounting system to be globally recognized, and for foreign investment and for credibility of our system, that we have no choice but to have an independent oversight. So to align Pakistan with global practices, best practices, and independent oversight mechanism, the Council formed a joint committee comprising of 3 presidents of ICAP. That was Shabar, myself, and Naeem on the ICAP side, and then we had 3 people from the SECP, Mr. Ali Azim, Mr. Zafar Abdullah, and their legal director, Mr. Muzaffar. And the committee was chaired by Dr. Tariq Hassan, the former chairman of the SECP. And the TOR that was given to this committee was to deliberate on this matter. Basically, mandate was what should be the form of the oversight board in Pakistan. Obviously, it was not a question of whether, it was the question of how. How do you form, what should be the form of the oversight board, what should be its composition, what should be its functions, what should be its role, etc., and whether, and what law. Those are the questions that we had to answer. So I think this committee, I am glad to say that the mandate that was given to this committee was completed, I think in a few months' time, and we submitted our report. Was it last month, Shahid? Last month in March, sometime in Islamabad. So it was a consensus report, and I will just explain to you some of the key features of the of this report and the law. I think I'll not go into these details. One of the issue that, again, this is the question of why oversight board. One of the issue was some of the Pakistani companies are listed in the European Union. HUPCO, for instance, is listed in Luxembourg, and OGDC is listed in London Stock Exchange. So obviously, for those jurisdictions, there was a question of, they were not accepting our oversight mechanism, and the firms were required to register with those entities, with their oversight bodies over there. Initially, they granted some exemption, but later on, this was withdrawn in 2011, and obviously, so that was one reason also that our companies and our firms which were doing audits of entities that were listed in European Union were not compliant. World Bank ROSC report I have already mentioned. I think this is, I've already given you the background that ROSC, World Bank and IMF, they also expect that there should be an independent oversight mechanism which should be independent of the profession. And the third was, of course, pressure from IOSCO, which is not listed in this presentation. There was something in the report, Shahid, on that also. So maybe I think for Islamabad, when you revise this presentation, maybe that aspect should be included. Basic criteria for, one of the reasons why our oversight mechanism in the form of Quality Assurance Board was not accepted by the international donors and multilateral agencies and global regulators was that the standard is that the oversight body needs to be, what they're saying is that whether your oversight body, the Quality Assurance Board that we had, can be a member of this forum which is called IFIAR, the International Forum of Independent Audit Regulators, and they have issued certain core principles, for which are mandatory for compliance by all members. So, so the basic deficiency, the basic criteria was that because of lack of independence,